Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Soccer Queens podcast, where we discuss everything female athlete performance training. I have a fantastic guest today discussing nutrition and its role in recovery and also healing from injuries. So, this will definitely be an interesting discussion. So, Lindsay, welcome back. I know you've been on some of my remote calls and some of our other Zooms. So, we're happy to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So, why don't you give everyone just a brief background and what you're up to today, and then we'll dive right into today's topic.
Yes, so I'm a registered dietitian. I work primarily with youth and teen athletes, helping them just learn how to optimize their nutrition to really help with performance. Everyone's always looking for that little percentage to get a little bit better. And nutrition, something we're doing every day because we eat every day. So it's something that can make that big difference there. So yeah, little bit about me.
So Lindsay is absolutely fantastic, and she's actually worked with a few of my remote athletes,
hmm
and she's given presentations on our calls, and she did a great in-depth presentation on post-training and post-game nutrition, which is it's so essential. And I hear a lot of people in the performance space saying, well, nutrition is recovery. And
hmm
yes, it is, but I'd argue it's a non-negotiable for human survival and but good performance.
Yes.
So let's just talk about why it is essential to have proper nutrition after a tough game and an intense training.
Yes, so nutrition is essential because you think about everything that is broken down or used during that game or tough training session. It's all got to repair itself or re energize when it comes to those carbohydrate energy stores in your muscles. And so the only way for your body to have protein available to help with that healing of the muscles is for you to ingest it. We can drink it, we can eat it, but if we don't consume protein, there is no protein for your muscles to heal with. So I think that is
Mhm.
something that a lot of athletes don't realize is that in order for your muscles to fully heal, you have to give your body the tools to do that, and those tools are coming from nutrition.
Yeah, the protein is a big one, and then you also mentioned carbohydrates, and I
Mhm.
think that's the macro that not enough of these young girls are getting post game, post training. So why is it not okay to just have a protein shake? Because everyone thinks, oh, well, that's all I need after a workout or
Yes.
a game.
Yes, and I will preface this by saying I'd rather something than nothing. So if all you
Mhm.
have standing in front of you is a protein shake, at least drink that protein shake. But it's not necessarily the best option because again, after that training session, after that a tough game, we need things to help with recovery. We've used a lot of energy. Energy, especially during soccer, is primarily coming from carbohydrates. We've used up those stores during that training session or during that game, and we have to replace them. Your body's primed to take those carbohydrates in and use them to replace that energy that you've lost.
Mhm.
And when you think about that from a recovery standpoint, we're going to re energize those muscles. So, tournaments, you have a game either later that day or the next day, your muscles are going to have that energy that you need to get through that next game.
Mhm. Now, do you know a lot about if an athlete doesn't get enough of the protein and carbs after that game, and then say they play the next morning, are they more susceptible to just muscle soreness, some extra fatigue, and it hinders them in that next day game?
100%. Yes. Because if you think about it, if you're not giving your body the tools that it needs to recover, your muscles can't. They can't. They can't recover. And when it comes to energy levels, you again, those energies are coming from carbohydrates. And if you aren't able to get those carbohydrates in, your body is forced to break down your muscle to turn that into energy. And that just can lead you to get more in a hole and
Mhm.
also increase your injury risk as well.
Yeah, I've seen that a lot in that last tournament game on a
Mhm.
Sunday. That's usually when the injuries tend to occur, but a lot of people will blame it on, oh, well, it was a lack of fitness or conditioning,
Mhm.
when they're not really looking at what was eaten the night before or even that morning. So we can't reiterate enough, you guys, how important it is to get that post-game nutrition. Now, let's give some like meal samples, what girls can eat afterwards and the amount they should be consuming. Say if they played the full game, the full 80 minutes, how much should they put back in?
I would say minimum we're aiming for 15 grams of protein, 45 grams of carbs for my smaller athletes. Once we start becoming, a little more adult size, really aiming that 20 to 25 grams of protein, 60 to 75 grams of carbohydrates there, which I know are just numbers. Chocolate milk is something that can be really helpful to help with recovery. For most athletes, it's just not going to be large enough to fully meet the recovery needs. A good size smoothie normally will meet those recovery needs. A sandwich, like a sub sandwich, especially, typically is enough to meet those recovery needs as well.
So those numbers sound great, and I know some
Mhm.
people know what they look like, some people don't.
Yes.
So if we're looking at like just like a plate, what
Mhm.
should be on that?
Yeah, so if we're looking at a plate, we would definitely want a source of protein. So
Mhm.
thinking chicken, fish, turkey, especially if it's between games, we do want it to be pretty lean so that your body's able to digest and absorb it pretty quickly. We're thinking 3 to 4 ounces, so about like the size of a deck of cards or the palm of your hand is kind of a good measure there. And then we'd want about half your plate to be carbohydrates because we do want to get those replaced. And then, of course, it's a dietitian. I'm always going to say having some fruit or vegetable on that other quarter of your plate is going to be helpful. Those antioxidants found in fruits and vegetables can really help promote recovery and healing as well.
That's super helpful, and I'm sure a lot of people are like, "Oh, wow, I actually have a lot of options and can eat
Hmm.
a lot of different things based on what I like." Now, if they're not at home and they can't
Hmm.
build their plate, what are some on the road ideas, whether they go to a convenience store like a Starbucks or if they need to
Hmm.
pack their food, what are some ideas for those away games and tournaments?
Yes, I always encourage athletes to really look at their schedule and kind of figure out where they're going to need to be able to get food from outside of a team dinner or outside of any team meals. Because I find a lot of these travel teams they do try to dine together, and so looking at that and then planning in advance is key there. But if we're thinking Starbucks, Starbucks has oatmeal, Starbucks has breakfast sandwiches. Some of them have like the little sandwiches, like I don't know, like turkey or chicken sandwiches as well. So all of those can be good options. It's just figuring out, okay, if I'm having oatmeal, maybe we're adding egg bites to it to get some of that protein in. So just looking at the options. I have lists that I actually was going over with one of my athletes last night and saying you can pick anything from this list. It was a bunch of different carb sources and anything from this list, the protein sources, and mix and match them. And that was really helpful to her to see, oh, when I get home after a late practice to help with recovery, it doesn't have to be anything complicated. It can be as simple as picking a food from this list. So she's like, I'm going to have a bagel and I'm going to have eggs and I'm going to put a piece of cheese on there and I'm going to make a sandwich. And that will work perfectly for recovery there.
I'm sure it's nice for your athletes to see, oh, well, there are plenty of options and you don't need to
Hmm.
cut anything out, which is great
Oh, yes.
news, especially for growing athletes. It's like, look, you
Hmm.
need to have your bagels, your sandwiches, your egg bites and granola and all these things. And it's just nice to just hear that coming from you. Now, what about the people that are just like, you know what? I don't want to eat at the fast food joints. I don't want to go
Hmm.
to any of these convenience stores, but what can they do for away games? They kind of have to prepare, right?
Hmm. What a lot of my families have been doing is placing, like they say they're traveling out of town, either flying or driving. They'll place a grocery order like at a Target or like here we have Kroger's or Tom Thumbs or like the grocery stores here that you can place pickup orders at. So you just place the order for what you need ahead of time and then you pull into that parking spot and they bring everything out to your car. So that typically is the easiest thing. I have some athletes that will just travel with protein shakes, so typically like the powder, or if they're driving, they can do like the pre-made shakes, and then just all the kind of snacks that they need to get through a game, and then they'll kind of figure out their meals. Sandwiches are one that I recommend pretty much all the time because
Mhm.
you can find them pretty much anywhere, and they're really easy source of fuel for athletes. They're just really athlete friendly.
Yeah, you can't really go wrong with sandwiches, and
Mm-mm.
everyone has a cooler or something to store it and just pack it for on
Yes.
the road. And that's one thing you
Hmm.
said to my girls. It's like, look, there is some discipline involved here, and you do have
Hmm.
to be prepared if you want to have proper nutrition and be fueled enough for the game. So I want everyone to just realize it's going to take some sacrifice and it is a process, but it's so worth it, and you want to be showing up at your best and just making sure that you're staying healthy. So let's kind of get into the injury side of this. How does a lack of proper nutrition make injuries more common in young female athletes?
Yeah, so when we're not getting in the tools that our body needs to recover, and I'm always going to go back to that protein because we need that protein in order for our muscles to physically recover and for all the other cells that your body needs to build, it's coming from protein. So if we're regularly not giving our body enough protein, then our muscles are regularly not able to fully repair themselves. So if your muscles are just worn out and tired, they're just going to get injured easier. The biggest mistake I see with female athletes when it comes to nutrition and injury risk is under eating in general. So, not even talking about protein, carbs, or fat, we're just talking about eating enough food for their activity level. Because my goal as a dietitian when I'm working with these athletes is to have them have energy availability, which means that they are eating enough to support their body's development and growth in everyday life, like breathing and our heart beating, plus all the additional energy they need for activity. And that can be really difficult, especially with school back in season or session, I guess. They're having to get up earlier. And a lot of my athletes are really struggling with this because like I don't want to get up earlier and eat breakfast, or it's so early I'm not hungry, and that just sets us off to a point where we are starting the day under fueled, and it's really hard to get yourself back in that energy balance where your body has that energy it needs to perform when you have practice later in the day, and sets your muscles up to like not be well fueled and just sets you up for injury there.
Mm. I'm so glad you're touching on this because it's so important to get that first meal. And I actually posted something that you had said about making sure you eat breakfast every day. Like that's a nutrition non-negotiable for every day. And
Hmm.
I saw a dad comment on it and he goes, "Well, fasting is good." And I was
Hmm.
like, "Oh no, here we go."
I feel like I just
So
don't respond.
yeah. So what would you say to a soccer parent that's like, "You know what? We don't have enough time in the morning for breakfast. It's okay to fast." What would you say to that?
I would I would tell them that our like as an adult, because I'm a parent myself too, our nutrition needs are very different than the needs of a teen athlete. And so while it might be okay for them to fast and they feel a lot better with that, it is essential for these teens to be getting in breakfast, not only from an athletic standpoint, but that all important student part of the
Yeah.
student athlete equation. Breakfast is shown to help kids or teens do better in school. And when you think about that, it makes a whole lot of sense. If we're giving our body fuel, we're giving our brain fuel so our brain can function better. And I like to try to tell my athletes, like, well, if we eat breakfast and your brain's functioning better, you probably won't have to study as much because you're going to retain more of that information. And maybe that'll give you a little bit more time back in your day. And I do find once athletes start feeling the benefits of this, and I think it's the same thing like training. Once you really start realizing, like, oh man, I'm a little faster now than I used to be because I've been doing these boring workouts. It's the same with nutrition. Like, I've been following this boring, unexciting nutrition plan, but man, I'm feeling it at practice. I have so much more energy. My performance at games is going up. And that can just be a huge way to really get yourself motivated to stick with it. But to get there, we have to have that consistency of starting with things like eating in the morning.
That's so true, and that's one thing adults really need to remember is that kids are extremely different than us in what they need. They
Mhm.
have the school day, and then after that, they might be running to school soccer or field hockey
Mhm.
practice, and if they don't have that breakfast, it like you said, they're already under fueled to start the day, and that's
Mhm.
just not starting on the right foot. And then the school and the benefits of just being able to learn and retain information because
Mhm.
you are fueled and you have nutrients. That's so key. So adults listening, please remember this and encourage your young girls to eat breakfast first thing in the day. Now, just coming back to the injuries. So one thing I've seen is with the youth female athlete during their growth spurt, they suffer just a lot of knee pain, whether it's in the patellar tendon. Osgood Schlatter's is really common, and it's definitely from a lack of strength and just mobility and flexibility as well. But it also seems to be a nutritional problem. So how can proper nutrition help some of these growing pain injuries with knee pain?
Yes, and that is a great question because some of it might be unavoidable, but there are things we can do nutritionally to help. And that again is going to go back to eating enough. That is the biggest thing. If we're not eating enough, our body is just not going to do things as well as it would if we are fueling it well. For bones, especially females, because we're laying down our bone density at a younger age, we have to make sure we're getting in enough calcium and vitamin D. And so if we're not including, I have a lot of athletes that just can't eat dairy. And if we're not doing any of those dairy substitutes that would have those vitamins and minerals in it, maybe we are adding a supplement in just to make sure that they're able to hit their calcium needs and hit their vitamin D needs to help with that as well. And then making sure we're fueling well all throughout the day, getting in protein at all of our meals, carbohydrates at all of our meals, and those micronutrients from fruits and vegetables at all of our meals can help with that as well.
Now you've talked about everyday nutrition versus game day nutrition.
Mm.
So, yes, we want to fuel properly on
Yes.
game day and maybe the night before and then after,
Mhm.
but there's also everyday nutrition that's
Mhm.
important. So, let's get into that.
Yes.
Why should we be focusing on everyday nutrition, not just that one day of the week?
Yes. And my big thing with that is nutritional deficiencies don't occur like from one day of eating. So we don't become iron deficient from one day of not eating enough iron. It happens from days upon days of not getting in enough iron for our bodies. And I say iron because that's a popular one with females. Our iron needs are higher than our male counterparts. And so and we tend to eat less iron rich food. So becoming iron deficient can really negatively impact performance. You have a lot. You're feeling like you have to work a lot harder. Your energy levels aren't quite as high, and there's nothing a game day meal can do about that. So thinking about any kind of micronutrient deficiency, any kind of under eating itself is not going to fix itself on game days. But if we are eating well every day, getting in the nutrients our body needs, that game day nutrition is going to give us that extra boost that everyone wants it to give them.
The iron deficiency seems to be a big problem. And again, it's like they see a female athlete getting tired in the second half
Mhm.
or the last quarter of the game, and they again blame it on the fitness, and then they make her run more and then overtrain. But really, sometimes it's that iron deficiency and that explains her exhaustion. So, what are some foods that can help with just getting the iron levels back to normal?
Yes, so if you are iron deficient, I definitely recommend taking a supplement, talking about that with your doctor or your dietitian to figure out which one is going to work best for you and looking at the amounts. But food wise, all of your meats have iron in them. Red meat is going to be the most rich in iron. So having red meat a couple times a week can be good to help keep those iron levels up. And then pairing those iron rich sources with vitamin C. And so, is that a cup of orange juice? Are we having bell peppers? Are we having strawberries or oranges with that just to help with that absorption? Iron is hard because it's hard for your body to absorb it that vitamin C can be helpful. A dietitian can also look at your diet and see if you're eating certain foods at the same time. That could be impacting absorption as well. Cooking in a cast iron skillet is another way to get some more iron in your food. And shockingly, cereal is actually like breakfast cereal is actually a good source of iron. Like some of them, looking at the labels, iron is required to be on nutrition labels. It can actually be a good way to get some iron in because it's put in there. It's typically added in just to give kids another way to get that iron in.
I didn't know that. Well, that's really nice.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
cereal guys, and then you get your
It's
carbs
not
as
all
well.
cereals, but, some of them, definitely.
Are there any other nutrients that the youth female might be deficient in and we need to be aware of?
I most people are deficient in vitamin D, because we are all so good about wearing our sunscreen now, so we're not necessarily getting it from the sun, and there's just not a lot of foods that have vitamin D in it. Even if you're being super intentional about it, it can be really difficult to hit that vitamin D level unless you're eating a lot of fish, like fatty fish. So vitamin D is typically one that most of my athletes are supplementing with just because it is so hard to get it in from food. Magnesium's another one that can make an impact as well. But I would say iron and vitamin D are the main ones, and calcium if we're not doing any kind of calcium sources.
That's really good to know, and I keep realizing that not everyone lives in Florida and down south where
Yeah.
it's sunny year round. So, yeah, I think, the supplementation can be very valuable for
Mhm.
many young girls. So, thank you for that. Now, what are some of your coaching programs that you offer? Because I know a lot of people listening right now are like, "Well, I need some specific advice and some meal plans and some accountability." So, what are you currently offering?
Yes, so I do offer meal plans. If someone's just like, I just want someone to tell me what to eat every day, that is something I can do. But I prefer, and I think most athletes end up realizing why, to work with athletes one on one and help them learn how to put together their own meals, put together their own snacks. Of course, I help and give them ideas, but learning how to fuel when you're on the road, like it's really hard to follow a meal plan when you're on the road. It's really hard when you're a teenager to follow a meal plan because you have friends that you want to hang out with. You're busy, you have a lot going on. And so learning how to fuel on the go can be a really useful tool. And with how busy, oh my gosh, you guys all train so much, how busy your training schedules are, we can really put together something customized to how can we fuel around all of these practices? Because I have some athletes that have school practice, like their school team, and then later that night they have their club team practice. And so it's like, how can we get in enough fuel by eating breakfast to really help meet your nutrition needs and what foods are great to take in between those two sessions to one help promote recovery from that first session and two to give you energy to go into that second training session for the day.
Guys, I'm going to include Lindsay's programs in the caption below, as well as all of her social media handles. So please be sure to give her a follow. And again, a couple of my athletes have worked with her and they've seen really great results. And whether you need to work with her for a short period of time or a long period of time, she has a lot of solutions. So I strongly, strongly recommend you check out all of her programs. So, Lindsay, thank you again
Yeah.
for coming on for this mini episode, and I'll see you
Yes.
guys next time.